Let's not let shame come in and say, see, Ben, you're just being a really bad father, a really bad husband. No. All my wife is saying is, I just need a little bit more of this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start there. Because we've identified a fracture. What's the one thing I can do to work on that?
Fractures in relationships are so damaging to progress. Sometimes the fractures are on us, sometimes they're on others. But in the grand scheme of leadership, we cannot progress unless we heal and mend. I've invited an expert in this area, Ben Weaver, who helps us get the tools we need to overcome these obstacles and live and lead with excellence. I can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is a call to leadership. Ben, so good to have you on the program, A Call to Leadership, today, as we just unpack what it means to be called to leadership. And, some of our conversations revolve around, obviously, leadership is relational, right? We are relational beings, but relationships are easily fractured. And sometimes when we look at relationships, I'd love to just dive right in, man. Let's talk about relationships. Where do we miss the mark when we are trying to have fruitful relationships?
Well, gosh, you dropped a bomb from the beginning. Holy cow. No, it's totally fine. Can I say everywhere? Can I just say, where do we drop the ball? Where is it from? I mean, and I say that sort of in jest because it's kind of like, it's funny. But I also mean it as a reality because I think there is a perspective to relationships. I just want to come up from a man's perspective because I know men and women approach relationships wildly just differently. I'm married, have been for just over 2 years. You've been married for quite some time. And so you know that your wife approaches relationships wildly different than you do. But from a man's perspective, I have to say that I didn't believe they were fractured for many years. I struggled with them, but I didn't know that I struggled with them. And it wasn't until life circumstances and all of my planning didn't work out that those things began to come to life. And so for me, to answer your question a little bit from the side, I think for men especially, and again, I know I'm just speaking from our perspective, they're fractured in so many ways based off of how we lay out our lives. But we miss the importance of that simply by just racing through our days. So that to me is kind of a preamble probably to where we want to go, but we could go a million different ways.
Yeah. Well, when you talk about racing through our days, it's so true. So many of us are just on the go. And I mean, I speak to me in my own life. It's like, okay, how many things can I put on my calendar? And, for what reasons? I mean, even that's the question. And so like for this year, I had a start, stop, and keep question that was posed to me. What are you going to start doing this year? What are you going to stop doing this year? And what are you going to keep doing this year? It was really introspective. And I had to think about it for a while. We did a panel discussion on it, sort of pre-2022. And my start was, I'm going to start having deeper relationships. I'm going to start deepening relationships because I knew that was something that was important to me. But in order to do that, I had to stop saying yes. Because I don't give myself enough margin to deepen those relationships. Because if I'm just constantly saying yes to doing this or doing that or so many commitments, then I'm spreading myself so thin that how can you go deep? I mean, really, and that's another question because I had to check myself. For years, I told my wife, hey, if you want my undivided attention, you have to say, honey, I need your undivided attention. And I thought that was good. I was like, pat on the back, hey, I'm giving her, permission to ask me that. And then when I thought it through, I'm like, what a jerk. Like that you have to actually tell your wife, like nothing she says is important enough unless she tells you that it's important. Yeah. And it was a wake up call. And it's like, no, you give undivided attention, be fully present in the moment because you're committing to being fully present in that moment with that individual. If you can't, say it. Hey, look, right now, I can't give you my undivided attention. I've got this going on.
Sure.
But trying to multitask or go on autopilot. How many times do we go on autopilot when you're having a conversation and like, sounds great, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not the only one I know. But like that's a fracture.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think, my mind is going a lot of different ways here, Nate. And for me, I'm thinking about some instances in my life and my wife's life in the last, let's just say 2 years, which we're time stamping this a little bit given where we're at here at the beginning of 2022. But the last 2 years is just COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And all of the fracture that has brought. And we navigated early on in the pandemic when, we're talking about, safety in place, whatever from getting some of the terminology now, because we haven't used it for several months, safer in place, basically, everybody quarantined in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so that broke a lot of the communities. Now, some of that I was able to push through with some friendships I had and we grew, but I watched a lot of relationships die, and I watched them die not by my own hand, but by theirs. And it's because they chose isolation for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I'm no longer angry about it. I'm actually sad now because what I saw was whatever reason there was something that happened in that relationship or wasn't happening that caused a fracture, that caused them to not want to pursue into a very difficult time in everyone's life. And because it is much easier to isolate for a time until you look around you and realize there's no one really around you. And I think what you hear me say, I know you have friends, we're friends, mm-hmm. but you're saying no, but there is a level of relationship that our souls long for that we need. I recognized that years ago when I was in my early 30s, realizing I don't like this. Nobody knows my junk, my stuff. Nobody knows the things I struggle with, the things that keep my mind racing at night. This is not healthy. Like I want to be there for other folks, other men as well. And so I'm thinking about the last 2 years specifically because I think it puts into context of just, I think the reason why this is on your heart, of like, man, relationships they're fractured in many ways. And I think we look to easy, quick fixes, but really what we need is a long-term recovery of our relationships, what that looks like. I don't know if I'm making any sense there, but.
Yeah. Well, that's it, because it's not, we're in the long game with relationships too, because that's how you cultivate them over time. And that's the whole idea behind not stop saying yes so much is so you can, one of my philosophies, at least I try to speak it, I don't know if I adhere to it as much, is do less and give more your best. Now, that's not everybody. Some people do less and they just do less. But for those of us who are like extremely driven, those of us who are, high achievers, we're, always doing more, but maybe we're not giving more our best. Mm-hmm. And when we can do less and spend more time in the trenches, developing, deepening those relationships, mending some of the fractured wounds along the way within ourselves and with others. I mean, that takes, like you said, that takes time. It's an investment. But it also shows that investments, mean that you care about the return on that investment too. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of, deepening relationships, mending fractures, and maybe having conversations around that. I mean, in challenging conversations, like asking the tough questions, like where am I missing the mark in this relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a spouse, a family member. I mean, how often do we have that real conversation and really just invite people and give them permission to share, hey, where can I be where can I be, I don't want to say better, even where can I begin to transform?
Yeah. Where can I shore it up in our relationship? Where can I begin to make some shifts and changes? Gosh, those are some necessary but very difficult. My wife and I are starting to have them more, which is good, but that doesn't make them any easier, because what we hear from, hey, where can I shore up, is ways that we have fractured the relationship or ways that we have degraded that relationship. It's like, oh, and what comes in after that? Shame, guilt, feelings of, how have I hurt this person because of that? And those are difficult to wrestle with, right? Because then we just fall into ourselves of like, oh, what have I done? And there's a lot of repercussions to that. And what I'm learning in a very young marriage, that my wife is so gracious. She says, then when I offer to you, just let's use this language of showing up. When I offer to you, hey, here's what I need for you to do better. It's not because I think you're doing a bad job. It's because this is just what my heart needs. So full stop there. Let's not let shame come in and say, see, Ben, you're just being a really bad father, a really bad husband. No. All my wife is saying is, I just need a little bit more of this. Yeah. Okay, let's start there. Because we've identified a fracture, to use our language today. And how can we, what's the one thing I can do to work on that? And, gosh, this is all real time for me. I'm like talking about this out loud and going, this is actually helpful for me too. So sorry, therapy on myself, right? I suppose what it is.
Yeah. Well, and I think you talk about like the vulnerability that you have when you expose, you offer, give permission to expose areas. You can call them weakness or even areas of opportunity. Let's call them that. There's vulnerability there because sometimes we want to protect our pride, protect our ego. And like you talk about being married, like your spouse, at least my spouse, I know will, she'll crush ego and pride at any juncture necessary. I'm thankful for it now. Early in our marriage, I felt wounded. But I mean, even, gosh, it was probably about 3-4 months ago. I came home and she says, hey, hon, I'm so happy for you that you're, pouring into these leaders and you're helping them to be transformational. And I was like, oh, man, thanks, honey. That's so sweet. And then she says, and she dropped the bomb. She said, but do you think you're bringing your leftovers home to your son? Bro, I mean, okay, first of all, brilliant the way she framed it, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, she stated an area of strength. Yeah. And then she didn't tell me that's what I was doing. She just asked me. She posed a question. Right. Do you think?
She wasn't accusatory.
No. Is it possible? And the answer was yes. I was definitely bringing home the leftovers for my son. Maybe 10 years ago, it would have taken me about 3 days to lick my wounds, right? And my pride, and finally say, you know what, you're right. But it hurt. But this was like, in the moment, I'm like, I thought about it. And she's, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing, because I'm pouring into these, these individuals, and I'm getting fulfillment from helping them to overcome their obstacles. And when I get home, I'm tired and I just don't have much left, and it is leftovers. So she helped me to expose that fracture. And then my next step was to begin to not bring home leftovers to my son, give him the first fruit of my labor. And because my first responsibility is to my family, it's so crazy, because like you think, okay, well, I have to make a provision for my family. So I have to make sure I focus on, you got to pay the bills, right? Right. Whether, at least that's our family dynamic is, and so, we're a great team. My wife runs, she runs the house. She owns it. She homeschools, all that. And I do, the outside work, right? I love business and as you know, but there's an aspect of that is like, I have to make sure that I'm leading as I've committed to lead in the home. So the next morning, instead of sending a a leadership article to a group on LinkedIn or wherever I was going to send it. I sent it to my son. And now, and then I message him and say, hey, did you enjoy that article? Now, I don't even know if he read the article, but what I do know, if he's even interested in that. But what I do know is that he now knows that I'm interested in him. Mm-hmm. And so that's where that permission comes in. But we have to be ready to receive it.
Yes.
Because it can go all wrong right there.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. I referenced this the last time you and I chatted. I'll reference it again because it's important. And it's a book. So I've been processing a lot of this. It's so much of a mental game. Mm-hmm. And it's because I think what happens is, let's just use your example. Because I could bring one into mine, but your example is great. There's a book called Positive Intelligence, and it talks about how we have two sides of our brain, the left and the right. So the left side is made up of our saboteurs. It's the emotions built around it are guilt and shame and anger and resentment. And we have the sage brain, which is around empathy and exploring opportunities and creativity, all these sorts of things. And there's all this neuroscience research behind it, okay? Most of us spend our days in our heads around the mental life and listen to more of our saboteurs than we would probably like to own. It sounds like what I hear you saying is your wife, maybe not knowing this, came in with the sage mentality of, I see that you're working hard. I see you're doing a great thing. Shows some empathy. Is it possible, let's explore, that you're giving your leftovers to your son, right? And you were like, that was actually a great approach, because she came at you with a wise, slow, inquisitive perspective, right? Rather than, hey, buddy, do you see what's happening in your world? Like a very accusatory, and you go, oh, shame, guilt, all these things. And all you've done is our relationships are fractured until the Lord comes back. So all you've done is taken that fracture and widen it a little bit more. And so what I hear us talking about is, how can we focus more on this sage, to use that language of our brain, to approach relationships with empathy. My wife has said to me over and over, Nate, Ben, if you will just lead with empathy, oh my gosh, the world changes.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, man, and the sad thing is, I'll just admit this to whoever's listening to this, I do it with my clients every day. I lead with empathy. Oh man, I'm so sorry. Or, oh gosh, it's a struggle. I struggle to do it at home. Now, I'm still trying to figure out why that is in many perspectives. That's not important to this conversation. What's important though is the awareness of, how can I show more empathy to my wife?
Yeah.
How can I look at the struggles or wins and go, gosh, way to go. Or, oh man, I see you struggling today. What's going on? I want to see and hear where she's at. It's those mending opportunities that I have missed over the years with many relationships that I'm trying to take notice of, to mend those fractures that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It reminds me of this dichotomy, if you will. On the one hand, you have condemnation, and on the other hand, you have compassion. Mm-hmm. And each approach has a much different potential outcome when you're working through ways to heal and grow and release opportunity. Compassion destroys condemnation. And Jesus talked about that. I mean, when he looked at the crowds in Matthew 9, 36, 37, and the Bible says he had compassion on them. Mm-hmm. And of course, then the Bible goes on to say that there's no condemnation in Christ, right? So, there's this clear relationship between the two activities that even Jesus is in his own leadership model, right? Where the Pharisees are like, this lady's wasted all this oil, and even his own disciples are like, wasting this oil on your feet could save, spend the money, right? Condemning her, give the money to the poor, sell the stuff. But his compassion overrides all the condemnation. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, she's doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, what kind of person does that take? I mean, or where do you have to be to walk in that compassion? I mean, that's another sort of a big question.
You know what? I'll just offer a first swing at it. For me, it's slowing things down. My wife and I had a conversation yesterday. We started what could have been an argument. And I needed to walk away for a minute, not because it was getting heated, but because we were just in the middle of activities and different things. And I sat down and I was paying attention to my body. Like, what's going on? And, okay, I'm a little anxious. Okay, where's that coming from? Why? Okay, Ben, how could you, what's some empathy you could show here? Okay, oh God, I see why she's saying this. Because she's seeing the world this way. Okay, got it. What are some ways we could explore whatever? Walk back upstairs. We start the conversation again, and it goes wildly different. And why? It's because both of us, in our own right, took a moment to say, what's really going on here? Because we were bringing our stuff into the conversation. Now, her and I interact several times a day, as you were through. So we get all these reps in, right?
Right.
But how do we approach that with the relationships that we don't get the reps?
Right.
You know, because those things can go south pretty quickly. I don't know if I have an answer to that.
No. No, this is good because it gets me thinking about strategy, if you will, relational strategy, strategic love, I call it, right? And the thought process is like, when you slow it down, you can strategize on different approaches. And just process. Okay, if I approach it in this way, like you've seen movies. I don't know if you've seen the Sherlock Holmes movies where So Robert Downey Jr. is sort of playing out this fight scene in advance, right? And then he actually executes it. I think we can approach relationships in that way. Okay, of course, he makes changes as he's mentally executing, right? Considering the strategy, a little bit of sort of the reverse engineering, right? So he'll play it out. Okay, that strategy I don't think is going to work, so I'm going to try a different strategy when I actually execute. And I wonder how much of that you're beginning to integrate into your decision making on how to approach, either with empathy or some other methodology. But how valuable is that to slow down and think through? Okay, what are the words? What is the body language? What's the most appropriate communication methods, styles, because we have verbal and nonverbal communication, that's ultimately going to yield, at least my hope, the best possible outcome for everyone involved, because that's leadership.
Yeah. The hardest part of that is you can control yourself. You can't control that other person.
Right.
And so you can make all these great plans. Like I'm loving what you're hearing. It's like, yeah, I've done that. I've approached, I've been kind, I've been compassionate on this, and I show up and my heart rate is low and I'm in a good place. I'm like, no, I'm great. The other person's not. And it's like, adjust. Oh, nope, don't take that bait. Oh, nope, slow it down, whatever. And then for in my marriage, it's I say something, I continue to show compassion, empathy, and something happens to de-escalate it, and then boom, okay, I got it. That's my wife. I'm pointing finger at her. There's a number of times I should probably, those of you listening, I'm the culprit more than my wife is. I just happen to be using this as a explanation. I show up more keyed up than I would like, for sure. But I think the point is we can control ourselves, which is important. And, but we can't control others.
Yeah. No, we can't.
I just thought of an example of a guy I follow, a mentor from afar who heard someone say one time, because he was looking for peer relationships. He was struggling. He had all these sages in his life, older men who were pouring into him, and he happened to be pouring in others, but he was lacking these friends at his stage of life, guys who were just sort of in the same season as he was. And a mentor said to him, look for men. It's all about keeping your side of the street clean. So be the friend that you want to be to others, but look for men who are keeping their side of the street clean, who approach relationships the way you want to approach them, and you will find bonds. And so it's a matter of asking God for those sorts of people. Like that it was for me. It's like, God, help me to find the men who, keep their side of the street clean. I keep mine, and we do life together. And that's the way it's supposed to work.
Huge. Yeah. I think about how pliable we are as humans, right? We're mentally pliable. We're spiritually pliable. I mean, physically pliable.
Some of us more than others.
Right? Especially after the holidays.
Yep.
So you think about that pliableness, and it's so important if you want to be something, to surround yourself with that something, because we are so pliable to our external environment. So if you want to be, and I think I might have mentioned this on a recent video, if you want to be a man or woman, a person of God, surround yourself with people of God. If you want to be a successful business owner, surround yourself with successful business owners, right? If you want to be a scholar, surround yourself with scholars. If you want to be a championship father, surround yourself with championship fathers. If you want to be an amazing spouse, husband, wife, surround yourself with that person. I mean, you keep saying it over and over again, but that's part of the process. Mm-hmm. So it comes with some internal examination, but it also comes with external. You know, who I think it's been said like this: show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And there's a lot of truth to that, because as we walk down this conversation of the fractures, those people likely will have experienced some similar fractures, and they can help walk us through mending them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
So how do you approach that part of your life where you seek out the wise counsel, the mentors who have already been down that road? I mean, do you just call people up or text them or find them in the phone book? No, we don't use phone books anymore.
That's so great. You know, I look to the circles that I walk in already, right? So I'm just thinking right now, okay, what are the, if we're talking mentors, what are the circles of information that I walk in? You know, what are the podcasts I listen to? What are the communities that I'm a part of? And those are very clear for me. In fact, I don't really have any room for any more communities like that, because I'm maxed out with that specific one. And I go, okay, where are the sages at in that arena, right? And for many of them, most of my mentors, if I'm fully honest, are from afar. They are a podcast or two that I listen to. Like, they're in my ear, right? Mm-hmm. And occasionally I feel like they're reading my mail. But then there are a few other older men that on occasion I'll reach out to, have lunch or breakfast with, that I allow them to speak into who I am becoming, because they get me, they understand me. And I get the chance to just sit at their feet and listen to, hey man, I'm up against this issue right now in my business or my marriage or life. What's your perspective? You know, if I'm fully honest, those conversations happen fewer than I would like. But also, I don't want to blame it on the last couple of years. It's just been a difficult thing to continue to fill out. Right. Yeah. And so that's how it's been for me from a mentor perspective. From a friend perspective, I had gotten to the place in my early 30s where I was like, I am just done being lonely. I just can't do this anymore. And I literally, at the time I was on staff at a church, I was a pastor, and I said, I'm just going to start a small group of guys in my age bracket that are single. At the time I was single, and whoever comes. And I reached out to a couple of guys who were sort of friends. I said, hey, do you want to be a part of this? And we ended up having 6 guys, including myself in the group, or maybe it was 7 at one point. I think it was 7. 5 of those men, 5 years later, were the men that stood with me at the altar with my wife. Wow. Right? And I thought about that day, what if I had not reached out? What if I had decided to stay lonely? I don't know who I would have asked to stand up, with me, And so there's something for me, it's like, where it's naming the season of life you're in, for men or women, depending on who are those people you can just reach out to. And I told this to my wife recently. A few of those guys I wouldn't have handpicked, but God did. He said, no, you need this person in your life, and I love them all dearly. I will fight with them and next to them for the rest of my life, if the Lord allows it, right? Because they're really good friends, and I love doing life with them. And I look forward to seeing what he does with their lives and our lives together, you know?
It's so touching and so challenging because you took ownership of cultivating those relationships. You know, you made a decision. I'm not going to isolate myself. I'm not going to stand alone. And you invited others to join you alongside of you along this journey of life. But it takes a little courage to do that because people can say no.
They can.
And sometimes they do.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay.
It is. We take it personal. 95% of the time it's not personal. Probably more closer to 100. It's not personal. That's just where they're at.
Yeah. But you open the door for those who are called to walk alongside of you. And I wonder how many people are in a better place themselves because you took the initiative to stand in the gap and say, we need community. Mm-hmm. We need to do this together. You don't have all the answers at the time.
Yep.
I don't think we ever have all the answers.
Yeah. I would also say the flip side is also true. So there is a time for courage and a time to pull yourself out of isolation and say, I need community, and go look for it. What I'm also learning too is we all are worth being pursued. Mm. I long for that in my life too. As I want to pursue my wife and I want my wife to pursue me, I want to pursue friends and I want them to reach out to me, you know?
Yeah.
I had a great story recently. I was driving in the car, happened to be listening to a podcast, and I was in a place a few weeks back. I just felt isolated. Like, man, I just haven't talked to my friends in a while. We've struggled to find the time to get together. It's just been hard, and holidays are here, and I'm just not in the place I want to be. And I was pretty emotional as I was driving about it. And then I've got my phone kind of set up on the dash. You know, I think I was driving somewhere, and I see this text come across it, and it was from a dear friend, not locally, dear brother. And he said, hey, man, haven't talked to you in a while. Let's catch up. And I went, thank you, Lord. And that friend pursues me. He says, hey, I value you. I value our friendship, our brotherhood. Yeah. Would you like to talk? So I think there's a place in a space where we need all find courage and go, no, I'm going to go after these people. But then there's also a receptivity of how can we also feel pursued? Because that's part of the love that Christ shows for us.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think you set the example when you pursue and show this is something that is beautiful and it's tangible and it's attractive. And I think I've wrestled with different kinds of friends. And so like I've looked at it from both business perspective and individualized, but like from a perspective of just friendships, I've classified at least 3 types of friends and 3 very sort of different, but they have it's a continuum. On the one type of friend, you may not even call them a friend, but the combative friend, the friend who is always the energy drain, right? The person that that's negative about all of your hopes and dreams, that possibly would even attempt to sabotage what your future self might look like. The friend who, and like I said, friend, you might not even call him friend, who is toxic and anathema, a cancer in your life. You got to cut that friend out. I mean, we've all had individuals in our lives like that. And then there's the second tier, who is the convenient friend. And the first thing, of course, that comes to mind is, hey, I'm moving, I need some help, right? Or can I borrow your pickup truck because I'm doing this? Or back in the day when we were younger and we used to go out, you were like the second or third person they called because nobody else wanted to, hang or whatever. They're just a convenient friend. And then you have the third tier, which is the committed friend. This is the person who will check on you when you're ill or send you that random text and say, hey, we haven't talked in a while, I miss you. The person who when you're down, and they know you're down, and maybe, your faith is just too heavy to carry. They'll carry it for you. This is the person who truly loves you and speaks new life into you so that you can spread your wings and fly just as high as you possibly can. And of course, who do you want more of in your life, right? But that's also the pursuer. You talk about the pursuer. And of course, in a marriage relationship, I would definitely want my spouse to be my best friend in that area. In fact, some may look at this and say, "Oh, I'm being nagged," but like just about every day, I get a text or an email or a phone call, and the question is usually around the same question is, "What time are you coming home?" And some would say, "Oh man, this is like it's burden and it's pressure." But I look at it just the opposite. Like you said, I look at it like I am being pursued. Like my family actually wants me to come home. Now you might say, "Oh, she's asking you when you're coming home, so she can, maybe not be there when you're there." No, it's the opposite. They want my company, and so I feel like I'm being pursued, and I love it. Like I love that question just about every day, and it really comes back to our perspective. How we approach these relationships. I approach it like, man, I'm so thankful that someone cares about me and wants to be in my company.
Yeah. No, and it's this innate desire that God has given us to be seen and heard. Right? We all want to exist in a space in which that occurs, and it is the most difficult time in history to have that. Mm. We all think it comes in all these digital ways, and it does not. It truly doesn't. It comes when you sit in the presence of another human being and get to actually be with them. Yeah. And have good conversation and whatever you fill in the blank. It's when you, and you're sitting and you're actually engaging, right? And maybe the conversation is not as fruitful, but it's because, again, you're just sitting in their presence. I think about some of the most fruitful evenings that I've had in my friendship journey over the last 5 or 6 years is when my buddies and I get together for, a bourbon and cigar night. It's like we're on a fire pit. Here we are. We exist and there's no topic. Like we talk about a variety of things, and late in the evening, it typically turns to real life kind of things. Mm-hmm. And we're all just sitting around listening and investing in one another. And it's holy. It is really good ground. Now I've had to till that ground though. We don't get there overnight. You don't sit down with a bunch of guys you barely know and say, "All right, let's hash out our stuff." It's like, no, it takes some investment. And so, there was something you said that brought me to that. This innate desire to be seen and heard. That's what that space is for us. Seen, heard, understood. And you walk out feeling like I belong somewhere. Yeah. Which is this desire that we all have. Is to have that connection relationally. Yeah, my mind gets to going on all the people I know who don't have it, who are just struggling and dealing with all kinds of depression and challenges because of that isolation I had texted a friend who was going through some things not too long ago, and I just said, "I appreciate you," on the text. And the response was, "That means so much. You have no idea the last time I heard that." Mm. It's almost impossible. I mean, it's just so difficult to even comprehend. Yeah. And just even those few little words of affirmation, of course, genuine, sincere, they're life-giving. Because you put on a pair of VR goggles and sit around a fire by yourself with your bourbon and your cigar and all your buddies, it's just not the same. Nope, never will be. Never will be. No, that's so funny. I even have a hard time. Like I picture that in my head, but I go, "That's just lame." For lots of reasons, that's just lame. Yeah, it is. It's existing in that space together, whatever that space may bring, and so. I have not arrived. In fact, I feel in many respects, reflecting on this last year, that I'm just in the beginning stages of it. And I think that in part is because I'm in a different season of life than many of my friends are. And so just having to reconcile that of what does that mean for our livelihood and pursuing these relationships moving forward, how does that look and sound and feel? But I think in part what I'm after is the continuation of the idea that I wrote about in the book I wrote about relationships, is just that relationships are everything. Full stop. What does that mean? That means that the people we have, we exist, we live with, we, drive next to, whatever that is, sit next to and around a fire pit. That's everything. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that we can take into eternity. We can't take the other things that we often go after. So.
No, and we spend so much time, I've thought about this, we spend so much time talking about different kinds of currency, like now cryptocurrency and all these different, of course, credit cards and different currencies, but how much relational currency are we storing? And how do we even gather relational currency? Well, I think it starts with investing in people and allowing them to invest in us. Developing good character, having integrity, listening, empathy, right? All that develops relational currency, and we start to save it, and then it's available to us when we need it most. Mm-hmm. And we do need it.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, sometimes we have to empty that account in a few fell swipes, but I think the key there is existing in a space in relationships where we are, there's an equal give and take. It's okay to take. We have seasons of taking. I've been in those. But we also have seasons of giving that sometimes if we don't pay attention to, we will miss, which we can give and offer, so that people feel loved and cared for. And we get to be the hands and feet of Jesus in spaces in which, Christ has just invited us into.
Yeah. And so you're working on a new season, and tell me about this new season. What's going on with your direction and your, especially speaking of relationships with your wife on a new project?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking. So we've been married just over 2 years. We have a toddler now. I keep wanting to say baby. She's not a baby. She's technically a toddler, even though we call her a baby every day still. Baby Mabel. But we've got this young, growing family. And one of the things that my wife and I were very, very attentive to, that we knew was an important part of our marriage before we got married, was we both came from families, legacies, whatever you want to use there, that had behaviors and tendencies and cycles of things that we did not want to bring into a marriage. We just knew we cannot continue this. And many respects they were similar, many respects they were different. We grew up in different homes, different family dynamics. But the truth is we don't want this anymore. We want to honor our families. We want to thank them because we both come from, even in the midst of all that brokenness, we come from, God-fearing families. We're grateful for that heritage that we have and that both of our families have established. But there's a lot of stuff that we don't want. And so my wife and I, even while we were dating, we pondered around this idea of what would it look like to grow a new branch on the family tree? Like, what would it like to pursue a new legacy with this amazing power of reproduction and growing a family and changing the trajectory of where our family goes as much as we can control it. Obviously, I can't control my sibling. She cannot control hers. But, how can we really take this now Weaver legacy in a entirely different direction as much as we can? Like, that would be a pretty cool vision to have. And so throughout the last couple of years, we've just been dreaming and praying and thinking about what does that look like for us? Where do we want to change? And there were four pillars that we continue to land on that are really important to us. Spiritually, emotionally, physically and financially. What would it look like to change the cycles, the brokenness, the trauma, the areas that aren't good in those 4 areas of our life that are vitally important to having a thriving, full, abundant life in Christ? And so my wife and I decided in the middle of having, we have a toddler. We want to continue to grow our family in the years ahead. Let's keep track of this journey, and let's share with others what we're learning and share the wisdom that God is sharing with us about how to do that. So we're starting a new podcast coming up in the first part of this year, probably sometime around late January, early February. We're going to launch a show called A New Branch, and just helping young families build Christ-centered legacies. And just sharing our journey. This is not a, hey, look what we've done. Yeah. This is a, hey, you want to come along with us? Because this is important. We live in a very trying time in history in which we have to decide, as we should, how we're going to choose to live in an appropriate and upstanding way. And this is the direction we're choosing. And come along with us, and we know there are young families out there who are wrestling with the same type of thing. And so we've got the wisdom of my wife and knowledge of her direction in counseling and therapy. So my wife is a therapist, and so she's going to have that perspective. I'm going to have the perspective of 15 years as a pastor, and we're going to come together and have a conversation around that and share stories from our own life. We're going to invite other guests on the show, people who are well along in their years, who've raised kids, who've built that legacy, and those who are like, hey, we're at this too. Can we maybe share our wins and losses? Of course. So let's talk about those. So we're excited about it. That's one portion of where our family and what we're doing is headed. And I can't wait to get started.
Man, I love it. I love it. It's what a journey. And I love that approach is let's grow and learn together. There's a humility that comes alongside of that. Look, we don't have it all figured out. And I mean, even this program, we are all on the journey. It's a continual process of learning and growing and sharing. And as the beautiful story of our lives continues to be written. Mm-hmm. And so I can't wait. I can't wait for the podcast to launch. So will there be a website, or how do you plan on getting people to find you?
Sure, yeah. So if you go to, eventually, it's not there yet, but we do have a website up. It's just not our current website. If you go to anewbranch.com, that's where all the podcast stuff will be listed. You can learn more about us and our family. Right now, I think it just has a lot of our wedding details. We got married 2 years ago. So our brand is shifting and changing. But by the time this thing goes live, who knows, we may have a web page up of the podcast. Our goal is just to start this thing and see what God does with it.
Yeah, so, man. Mm-hmm. I love it. I know it's going to be used in a mighty way. Plus, it also speaks to what we've been talking about. If you want to be someone, surround yourself with others that are either have achieved that or are along that journey to walk alongside of you. And probably I wouldn't say either or, it's and, right? Yeah. It's an and especially in families, because it's ironically, it doesn't take much to start a family, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But it takes a lifetime to learn how to raise a family.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The investment but it pays dividends. I mean, I come from a family of brokenness. Both my parents were divorced, and just lots of trouble. And you talk about, generational curses, if you will. And I wanted to break that. I wanted to have a healthy marriage. And it took work, and it still takes work, right? It takes falling on your face before God. It takes constantly learning more about better ways, transformational ways, especially when it comes not just marriage, just parenting. I mean, I remember when my son was little, just a real strong-willed child, and I'm reading books. One book's called Setting Limits for Your Strong-Willed Child, and different books. I'm like, oh, okay, just learn, and counsel, and spend time communicating with my spouse, and learning from others, and having conversations with people who have been down that road. And like the nuggets of wisdom that you pick up, and they stay with you. I remember one couple who had a little older kids than us said, when it came to discipline, they said they had a phrase they used when the kids were little, which was this: obedience first. So when I ask you to do something, instead of asking why, be obedient first, then I'll explain. And it's like, oh, wow, that's great. And so I began to use that terminology. And so when my son was like, I said, it's time to clean up your room. And of course, the him and Han, obedience first. Then we'll talk about why it's important to clean your room when they're small like that. Of course, later, you change it, but they're already, hopefully, when teenagers. I mean, we've got the teenage thing going on, but even that, like today, with this season of life we're in, having resources to have that conversation or listen in on that conversation, so that we can really grapple with these, these really, these issues that plague every family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we know that we'll attract families who already know that they want to change some things, but I think there's also a perspective of we are going to have to name, what does this stuff look, smell, hear, and sound like? All those things. I think I'm naming it two of the same sentences. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Point is like, how do we start navigating this? Like, what does this look like? And so, one of the tools I think that we want to develop is around naming the specific things that you want to change and how to name them. Like, if you've noticed this behavior in your family, this is probably something to pay attention to, and here's how you can start working on X, right? And so what is that? And so again, we haven't figured all this stuff out ourselves. So we're going to be in a lab together in a lot of respects, which means, we're going to put our stuff out in front of everyone to see it. So welcome to that show. Right. But,
transparency, right?
Yeah. But I think there is, we need, my wife and I want to be leaders, but more than that, we want to start and be the change we want to see in the world. Mm-hmm. So let's just go. Yeah. Let's just stop. Let's get off the sidelines and let's go. Yeah. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I love just our time together. You're a dear friend. And what's great about dear friendships is, even though you may not see each other that often, even though you may not know intimate details about different things, there's that connection that at any point in time when you connect, you can talk about real things, and you can really, communication is a sharing, but it's also, when you share, you exchange ideas, you exchange news, you exchange information. And so, this is real communication, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're sharing and exchanging and growing, and we hope that our community will also take and learn and share and grow and do it in a way that edifies, right? Yeah. In fact, one of my favorite verses in Scripture is Ephesians 4:29, which is, let no unwholesome words come out of your mouth, but only those that are good for building others up according to their needs, so that those who listen may benefit. Mm. And it's like, wow, don't we need some more of that in the world today?
Seriously. Yes. Yeah. I want my heart and my speech to be that of wholesome and building up. And that's what we hope our podcast is going to be about too, so that's our hope and prayer.
That's good stuff. Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna put you on the spot as we close. So, but you're easy on the spot. So you're,
I thought I was on the spot the whole time. So
yeah, you're a champ. So at the end of the journey, you're at the great summit, and you look back. What is the one sentence that you will want to be remembered by?
Wow. It's I may take two sentences. Sorry. If you've ever had a guess that's only been one.
You can have a connecting sentence. Okay. Yeah, a semicolon.
I'm hearing two things for me. And the first is he spent his life living and thriving in God's bigger story and invited others to do the same. And then the other sentence I'm hearing, which is very well connected to that, is he did life differently. He finished the race. He ran strongly. Like that's what I want to be known for. Like, yeah.
You're on your way, my friend.
Thank you.
Ben Weaver, so good to have you on. I have to have you back because this is a conversation that we're barely even scratching the surface on.
Let's do it. Anytime, my friend.
It's good seeing you.
Yep.
Well, my friend, we did it. I'm so honored you were able to join me on this episode of A Call to Leadership. Now, this might not be for everyone because you really have to be in a certain place in order to take the kind of steps to level up your leadership. And I want you to be taking steps. And for those of you who feel like you're ready for something like this, you can go to our website, greatsummit.com. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But here's the cool thing that we have. We've got a masterclass. We have all different kinds of events. We even have our leadership club where you can meet other people just like you. You and I will get to spend some time together and really focus on aiming for greatness.